Hello, and welcome back for another ACCA video where in today's recording I'm going to take you through my full tutor analysis of the ACCA SBL examination pre-seen information for the June 2025 sitting for the company Darren Shoes Limited. My name is James, I'm an ACCA qualified member and I help students out, just like the ones above me, to pass their SBL examination going through my exclusive SBL notes. So if you'd like a copy yourself, click the link in the description of this video and you can get a copy to go through with this recording so you can make your own notes on top of it. I'm also delighted to say that I'm associated and affiliated with Astranti. They offer some fantastic mock papers, pre-seen analysis packs, and if you'd like to check those out, click the link into the description of this video where you can access all of their resources. And for pure transparency on the channel as always, if you were to purchase anything through those links, I'd be entitled to a small percentage which goes to supporting the channel. And as always, a massive, huge thank you. Get yourself comfy. We're going to go through this top to bottom now. Pen and paper at the ready, or if you've got the notes, they are definitely going to help. So let's start off with the contents page, as you can see on the left-hand side. If I was in your shoes, whether you prefer pen and paper or an Excel spreadsheet, separating out your notes section by section would first of all be a really good starting point, because when it comes to the exam date, you have not got time to be going back and rereading the pre-seen information. You've got about 20-30 seconds to quickly flick back to that particular area, reference a particular thing that you're looking at. Maybe it's a figure, percentage, what we'll go through in this video, and therefore applying it to the scenario and to the requirements on the exam day, and that is what is going to get you the marks. Key things you'll see as we go through the notes, everything is colour coordinated. There are lots of things that have bits of cross references on there. Luckland is the main country where Darren Shoes Limited actually operates, but in terms of, and we'll come on to this, where they manufacture most of their goods, that is outsourced overseas. You'll also see on the left hand side we've got some theories on there as well, which I'll just scroll down so you can get the full picture. In terms of ACCA SBL corporate governance areas, agency theory, stakeholder theory and CSR could all potentially come up on your exam day. We have got hints and flavours throughout the full pre-seen materials for you to be aware of. There are 20 professional skills marks that will relate to analysis, commercial acumen, communication, evaluation and skepticism. Make sure you know how to apply those correctly to a given requirement. There'll also be some form of ethics on your examination. Now it's all about, yes, knowing about integrity, objectivity, professional behaviour, professional competence and due care and confidentiality. But the key bit is applying those concepts to the scenario and following the actual requirement, what it is asking for. Again, applying it back to Darren Shoes Limited and the scenario. We also have other areas such as models and theories. We've got the balanced scorecard on there, which is a performance measurement tool. And again, it goes through key aspects such as financial, customer, internal processes, learning and growth. And based on the pre-seen information, we've seen aspects of all four areas, and therefore I would recommend that you put it down in your revision. The same goes for the 3 E's model. Again, linking back to what you have in terms of your syllabus areas and the tuition provider you've used. The 3 E's model, again, has been tested in the past on a variety of different SBL exams, but it really links to actually the company being listed and being a public sector organisation on there. So it has a wider impact on the economy, the effectiveness, the efficiency. Darren Shoes Limited currently is a limited company. It could become listed on there. It could float on the stock exchange of Luckland. It's just something to be aware of. Again, that's why I have it down in my notes that it could be tested. The other areas that you can see for the models on the left hand side, you've got PESTLE, Porters, SWOT analysis. I'm sorry to disappoint, but all of them do have little flavours that you can see if you download these notes yourself, of a variety of different areas that could be tested, and you'll see these throughout the pre-seen information. So we're going to get stuck into that straight away. Coming on to the introduction now, up at the top right, where we have Darren Shoes Limited, a company, as we said, an LTD, manufactures and sells shoes. They are the 2 key elements that you need to be aware of for the case study. It's been around for 100 years, so it has the heritage factor. It's got good customer satisfaction in the past, and it is also currently the 4th largest shoe manufacturer and retailer in Luckland, the developed, politically stable country where it is based. So in terms of the model for Pestle, you've got a sort of political point you could refer to there, another economic factor. And in terms of the other competitors, so we have here that Darren Shoes Limited is the 4th largest, and that is 4 out of 5 who hold 45% of the market share. But that will become more self-evident as we go through the full preceding notes. Now, in terms of the shoe manufacturing and retailing industry in Luckland, this is where we get into the details you need to be able to apply on the exam day. So in terms of the organisations in the industry, that they manufacture adult and children's shoes on there in factories or smaller workshops to sell them to customers in Luckland via their own retail outlets and online stores. Export sales are made to customers in other countries via a distributor. So again, it's being able to distribute between the different actual revenue streams on here, the different market segments, and actually understanding the different stakeholder groups and the industry dynamics. So you've got retail outlets, that you've got bricks and mortar stores, and you've got online stores as well. So those are the different revenue streams, and they're broken down later on in the pre-C materials. Shoes were traditionally made from leather, but a variety of cheaper man-made materials have been developed and are now used extensively in shoe manufacturing. These materials include synthetic leather, which is made from a fabric base covered in plastic. So when we're looking and reading between the lines of the pre-C materials, that is a potential environmental factor for a pestle analysis, and it's really key that you differentiate between the two different types of shoes there, in terms of it being that we've got the leather goods and the cheaper man-made ones. In Luckland, revenue from the industry in 2004 was $3,750 million, with an average annual growth since 2000 being at 1.71%, and forecast average annual growth over the next 5 years expected to be 1.06%. So less future growth within the industry. Those are some key facts and figures that you need to be aware of come the exam day, as you've got to apply things back to the country of Luckland where Darren Shoes operates. Now, coming on to those competitors, and we know that Darren Shoes Limited is the 4th largest shoe manufacturer. Luckland market for the manufacture and retail of shoes is dominated by 5 Luckland organisation manufacturers: Flamingo, Rego, Parish, Dearn, who we're representing, you can see it in yellow, and Betterby. Those companies in the blue highlighting, make sure you've got those down. Again, they could come up on a requirement on the exam day. And in terms of some key percentages, together they have over 45% of the market, with over 200 smaller organisations holding the remainder. So that is 45% to those 5 large companies, and then 55% to the remainder of smaller ones. Dearn actually has 9.4% market share, which you can see on page 12. And we're also going to look at those companies in a bit more detail later on, so make sure you've got them noted down. Coming on to production now in Luckland, so let's scroll it down. In Luckland, shoes are produced in 2 ways. These are key things for you to get down: either mass-produced techniques or they are handcrafted. Mass-produced, as it sort of does what it says on the tin, that is where they are of a lower cost, whereas if something's handcrafted, that is going to be more expensive. Dearn, for your notes, actually does both ways in what they produce and what they sell. And key thing here is you don't have to be a shoemaking expert, you've just got to have a good understanding about the production processes and how they operate and sell. Now, in terms of mass production, this is where shoes involved actually they use machines and almost all stages of the production process, although many of these machines need some human supervision or human operation. There are 4 main stages in the production process, whether they are produced using mass production techniques or handcrafting on there. So the 4 main stages we're going to be coming on to in a moment for it. But key things for you to note there, which I've just thought off the top of my head in terms of machines, that's you've got to think about capital expenditure there. and you've got the human supervision and operation linking into the social factors of a pestle analysis. There are some other models and frameworks like Porter's diamond model on there, which I've broken it down. We've got different factor conditions, demand, and relating supporting industries in the firm strategy. Again, it's a framework that explains how a country's economy can gain a competitive advantage. I don't have a crystal ball for your exam, but based on the pre-seen information, it doesn't come across as something likely to be tested. Whereas on the other hand, for ANSOS Matrix, that's more of a strategic planning tool with the 4 stages of market penetration, product development, market development, and diversification, all screaming out for different areas of this shoe manufacturing business, and therefore I've got down could possibly be tested based on the pre-seen information. So now let's go down to those shoe manufacturing processes where we've got the 4 different stages. Again, as I said, you don't have to be a major expert on this. Just know that we have the first step of cutting, the next stage of stitching, the stage 3 of lasting, and the final 4th stage, as you would imagine. The products are done and quality checked and they are finished. Now the key details here, which are super important for you, are that this is what Dearn used to be. So Luckland-based manufacturers traditionally produced all of their output in Luckland. You'll see later on in the recording that actually Dearn have moved some of their operations overseas and they've outsourced it to a third party. With the advent of mass production techniques, so with the arrival of these techniques and the development of man-made materials over the last 20 years, a number of other countries have expanded their shoemaking and manufacturing industries to take advantage of the lower production costs which these countries offer. Some Luckland-based manufacturers, like Dearn on there, of mass-produced shoes have transferred some or all of the production to third-party manufacturers in these countries. So if you have a little scroll down, or if you've downloaded the notes, go to page 7. And this is where you'll see that Dearn has transferred most of the manufacturing to Totland, and they have lower costs, and that is the main reason for transferring the manufacturing overseas. Now, speaking of costs, you have the likes of if a shoe is handcrafted now. And this involves better quality if it is handmade, but still involves some machines involved in the process. And because it involves more human interaction in the actual process of making the shoes, they have higher costs to actually produce them. So handcrafting involves, as you would imagine, the same 4 stages as mass production, but the shoes are produced using skilled labour to carry out by hand some of all of the tasks performed by the machines within a mass production environment. For example, the sewing together of parts of the upper. Handcrafted shoes are usually made from leather rather than man-made materials, so a bit more expensive, and are admired for their very high quality and craftsmanship. They are more expensive to produce than mass-produced shoes because of both the high quality of the leather and the higher proportion of skilled labour used to manufacture them. They are therefore sold at a higher price than mass-produced shoes. So the 2 increasing cost factors you need to be aware of are the high quality of the actual goods and the cost of labour associated with it. And then in terms of the actual handmade shoes, they are not outsourced. This is a massive point for you to get down on here. So the production of handcrafted shoes has not been transferred to third-party manufacturers in other countries, in other words outsourced, and they continue to be manufactured in Luckland. What are we getting on here for the last final part is we have different types of shoes. There are 4 types of shoes manufactured and sold in Luckland. Now, Dearn actually manufactures and sells all 4 of them, but the key major thing for your notes to get down is that the formal shoes are the first type of shoes. They are the only ones that are handcrafted, smart shoes for adults and made of leather. That's why you can see in my notes, key points that only formal shoes are the type of shoes that are not mass produced on there. You've got the semi-formal, casual and children's. That are the ones that are mass produced. So let's begin having a look at for the market structure now, where we have the information for those 5 large organisations and the smaller organisations in the industry that was set out in Table 2. Now Table 2 is just below, as you can see, and just go through it one by one, where I've broken it down. We've got the 45% market share of those 5 largest companies. Dearn is the 4th largest, and we've got Rego, Flamingo, Dearn, Parish and Betterby, those key names that we saw before. In terms of the products and competition, how they all sort of link in a bit more. Again, if you've downloaded these notes, if you go down to page 10, you can see how it overlaps and those names are highlighted for you. In other words, as you look through the production methods, the target market, the real sort of general factor that I get in terms of, one, from a share percentage ownership that they have, or market share in terms of Luckland, all of the companies, especially the big 5 and the smaller organisations, Dearn competes with absolutely all of them. You kind of get the gist as are they doing too much, or should they be targeting? The only one we don't have on there that you might want to get down for your notes as maybe an opportunity, no 18 to 30-year-olds targeted. But as you go and look at the other options of Rego, Flamingo, Parish and Betterby, the other companies have found their sort of niche in the marketplace at different price points and different types of shoes. The key bit for you to get down is that Parish and Dearn are the only 2 that handcraft their shoes. The rest, as you can see, are all mass produced, and that is really critical to get down, as that is where we have only the other smaller organisations are in the market for handcrafted goods. So if we come down to the different sales channels now for a bit more detail, 85% of the revenue earned by Luckland shoe manufacturers comes from shoes made in Luckland. And this is the competitive marketplace that we've been talking about above, where they sell directly to customers through their own branded retail outlets, so that's bricks and mortar on a high street, and their own online stores. Revenue from selling through retail outlets, these are offline sales now, was $2,260 million on there, and that's approximately 60% of the total industry revenue in 2004. Now, before we get on to the next percentages, really key point for you to get down so you don't get confused is, we've just touched on the 85% of the revenue earned by Luckland shoe manufacturers, and that is broken down into the 60% we've just touched on there in terms of the retail outlets, and we're coming on to the point now which is the other 25%, which of course the 60 plus the 25 gives us the total for 85 overall. So the 25% comes from revenue from online sales as a proportion of total sales revenue, has been increasing over the last 10 years and currently stands at approximately 25%, in other words, $926 million. Organisations with an online offering do not make online sales outside of Luckland, delivering to Luckland addresses only. So again, from a SWOT analysis point of view, lots of opportunities there that Dearn could be exploiting. Historically, the Luckland industry has had an excellent reputation worldwide for the quality of its products, and so for many years a proportion of Luckland manufacturers' shoes have been exported. In recent years, however, manufacturers of handcrafted shoes in particular have been seeing an increased demand in their products from markets where there are rising levels of disposable income. 15% of the revenue earned by Luckland-based shoe manufacturers was from exported sales via distributors, predominantly of handcrafted shoes. So those handcrafted shoes, key thing for your notes, you can see on the other side of the page, those are formal shoes that Dearn, Parish and smaller organisations actually produce themselves. So again, another opportunity from a SWOT analysis perspective if it was to be tested on the exam. I've also noted here about Porter's value chain, that strategic management tool, helping businesses to identify and improve their competitive advantage. And we've got the 4 elements there about breaking down a business into its primary and supporting activities, adding value, improving efficiency, and developing a competitive strategy. Definitely something I would get down in your notes to make sure you're prepared in case that value chain came up and it could be applied and tested on your exam day. Now, remembering those figures we've just touched on, the 60%, the 25 and the 15, that is the Luckland footwear manufacturing revenue split for 2004. Key thing here, that is not for Dearn, that is for the market as a whole. Key thing that we'll see later on into the recording is that the online sales in Luckland are at 25%, But for Dearn, it's actually only at 12% on there. So if you've got the downloaded notes, check those out further on, and we'll cover it later on in the recording as well. But another opportunity for Darren Shoes Limited. We now come on to the challenges within the industry, and these are areas that Dearn has historically prided itself on. To kick the ball off rolling here, about the competition has historically been based on price, product range, quality, marketing, brand name, and distribution channels. But we've got a key point here. In order to meet the demands and the tastes and preferences and the expectations of customers. So speed to the market has been increasingly important over the last 5 years. This was due to the growing number of fashion and price conscious consumers in Luckland wanting to buy shoes more frequently to keep up with the regularly changing fashion trends. Flamingo leads the way in this area. Make sure you get that down for which competitor we are referring to, and it can design, produce, and get ready and sell a new version or type of shoe called a style in its retail outlets or online within just a few weeks, allowing the company to respond quickly to changes in fashion trends. Now, we're not told how long it takes actually for Dearn to go through this whole process, but you can imagine with them actually moving some of their operations, especially for mass production overseas, which we'll come on to later on in the pre-seed materials. This is where it is something that is holding them back in their operations. Household disposable income is a key driver of demand, affecting the quantity, frequency, and quality of shoes purchased. There are signs that Luckland economy is slowing down. Growth was 5.1% 5 years ago, but has fallen to 1.6 2 years ago and was only 1.1 during 2004. Growth in 2005 is expected to be 0.8. In line with this economic slowdown, the proportion of mid-price shoes sold has been falling, and the proportion of low-price shoes has been increasing on that. Forecast industry growth therefore derives predominantly from sales of handcrafted shoes, which Darren does, to both export markets, see above, and in Luckland themselves. So a lot of things to bear in mind there, some economic factors from a pestle point of view, and also lower margins are most likely to be affected in terms of these changes in the actual economy. But remember, Dearn sells mid-price shoes as well. They cover all 4 types of shoes, and we'll come on to later on the quantity of the types of shoes they also sell. We're then given more information that there is increasing awareness that employment protection legislation is poor in the countries in which third-party manufacturers used by some Luckland shoe companies that are based. In other words, Luckland, the country where Dearn currently is based, has actually moved some of its manufacturing overseas, and this is where the increased awareness of this in terms of employment protection is becoming more prevalent for consumers. The manufacturing processes used in these countries have been having a negative effect on the environment. As a result, a growing number of customers are unwilling to purchase shoes manufactured actually in these markets, which again we'll come on to. Darren Shoes Limited actually produces some of their shoes overseas. Despite the impact on their disposable income, they are still choosing instead the more expensive shoes of manufacturers such as Parrish, which emphasises their Luckland heritage and the quality of their handcrafted shoes. These manufacturers are therefore flourishing in both Luckland and export markets. It's worth noting there, Darren Shoes Limited does the same thing that Parrish actually does there, as you can see. So these manufacturers are therefore flourishing. This is an increasing the need for skilled workers in Luckland, as well as attracting new entrants to the industry. So another hint of Porter's 5 forces, a factor there. SWOT analysis, plenty of opportunity, with the aspects of the environment being from a pestle point of view. But key information about a competitor and also how it will impact on the operations of Darren Shoes Limited. From production through to disposal, shoe manufacturing and retailing has a big impact on the environment. The manufacturing process releases large amounts of carbon dioxide. The industry was responsible for 1.4% of global greenhouse emissions in 2004. That's a key percentage to remember if you can refer to the environment in a pestle analysis on your exam day if it was set as a requirement. And another key note for you to get down is no director is in charge of the area of the environment or sustainability. Every year, hundreds of thousands of pairs of shoes are disposed of in Luckland alone, most of which end up in landfill sites. Most materials used in shoe manufacturing take years to biodegrade. So as a result, more environmental factors here, and a large proportion of shoes purchased online are returned to the seller if they do not fit, and if they are not as described as they were on the website, if they are damaged, or if the consumer orders more. And with customers getting the shoes, taking them back, that is increasing the costs relating to the companies. If we come back up to page 5 now, so again, we've touched on before that no director is accountable for the environment, or the actual impact of those roles can be found on page 9. One pair, as you can see here, because they are unsure of the size, that was about returning the goods. This adds concerns around the environmental impact of the industry. The level of returns is driven by the fact that there are no universal foot sizing standards, so shoes may not fit, and because many retailers do not charge customers for returning the postage or shipping if the shoes purchased are not wanted. So retailers must absorb those added costs, more environmental factors there that could be referred to. We then come on to the innovation and developments. You can see from my notes plenty of pestle points here about the environment, technology, and we have growing environmental awareness and interest in ethical and sustainably sourced products have led to the development of ethically sourced shoes by a small Luckland-based manufacturer called Kind Shoes Co. That's the only time that company is mentioned throughout the whole pre-seed materials, and they're an organisation which has successfully positioned its ethical and sustainable ethos as an alternative to that of the main manufacturers. Its shoes are made from more expensive, eco-friendly, sustainable resources, which have been ethically sourced, in contrast to the unsustainable, cheaper, man-made materials which are used more in shoe manufacturing. Again, this is what Dearn has been doing, moving some of its actual production and manufacturing overseas. Recycling initiatives have been trialled by a number of manufacturers in other countries, but they are yet to be any significant developments in the area of Luckland. More opportunities there to create customer awareness. There are increasing levels of technological change in the industry. For example, 3D printing can be used to produce prototypes, custom-made shoes, or limited editions of styles. Technology-enabled intelligent shoes are growing trends. They can measure athletic performance, track fitness, and evaluate health metrics and provide personalized feedback to wearers of the shoes. So using Bluetooth to transmit data to a smartphone. Another trend is customizable shoes, particularly athletic shoes, which customers can design and personalize. Lastly, we have virtual and augmented reality technology is being used on some online sites in Luckland to enable customers to try on shoes to see what they look like on them via their smartphone and on the cameras on there. So again, it's more things within the industry that could come up that you need to be aware of. And in terms of the pre-seed materials, a massive area that you need to be thinking about if there are any areas of technology, the environment, pestle analysis is one of those areas that you could need to refer to. Now let's move on to the industry body, industry standard and legislation, a really important section, especially to demonstrate your understanding of the scenario. The first key term to remember for your exam comes in the form of the Luckland Shoe Association, the LSA, and that aims to promote the industry domestically and globally. It provides its members with expertise, support, advice, guidance, and insight on a range of relevant topics through its staff, its publications, the network of members, and the links to the Luckland government. So just reading between the lines there, you've got elements of a political factor with the government mentioned, and be sure to refer to the full term of the Luckland Shoe Association, LSA, in your exam if it came up in a requirement that it could be applied to. Speaking of things that could be applied to across a variety of different areas, is that there is an accreditation by the Made in Luckland campaign, which is set up by the LSA, which we've just touched on, to provide Luckland manufacturing shoes domestically and internationally, and it indicates that manufacturers have complied with standards regarding the quality and safety of products, labour standards and sustainability guidelines. Accredited manufacturers can use the Made in Luckland MIL mark. And this is all about the 4 stages are actually below on page 3. So remember how we were going through and saying, you know, when they actually make the goods all the way down to when they're signed off for quality. Those are the areas on page 3 about the different stages they're referring to. And that Made in Luckland MIL, make sure you get that down, because we are told that Darren Shoes actually has that accredited manufacturer's mark later on in the pre-seed materials for for the area of their handcrafted goods for the formal shoes. So make sure you get that down in your notes. Shoe manufacturers, like all businesses in Luckland, must comply with employment, health and safety, consumer protection, competition and data protection legislation. There is a strong system of copyright protection in Luckland as well. Some risk areas definitely to note down there. Also could overlap with some ethical areas and also legal factors from a pestle requirement if the theory was to come up. Manufacturers must carry out a number of legally required health and safety tests on all shoes to ensure the materials used to manufacture them are non-hazardous. Most staff employed in the industry are members, and another key area for you to note down, the National Shoe Union, NSU, which looks after the interests of its members at work, for example, negotiating agreements with employers on pay and conditions. So overlaps with potential ethical areas if you were to bring into account the union in a question, and also a social factor from a pestle analysis point of view. So plenty to get down there in the industry body, standards and legislation. Moving on to now the Darren Shoes Limited area and actually the background of the company. I'm surprised I didn't put this further up in the pre-seed materials, but let's get stuck into it now. That Darren Shoes Limited, Dearn, was founded nearly 100 years ago, so they're well established, by Dermot Dearn. Over the years, it has built a reputation for reasonably priced, well-made shoes for adults and children. It was one of the first organisations to be awarded that MIL mark we've just touched on for its formal type of shoe on there. So that is the handcrafted formal type of shoe. So got good brand image, well-established organisation, the key name of Dermot to get down there, and it's the only place in the pre-seed notes that Dermot has been mentioned. Now the next bit is a key strategy change that you need to get your head around ahead of your exam. So until 15 years ago, all of Dearn's manufacturing was actually based in a town called Leyen in the southwest of Luckland. At that point, the company decided to transfer most of its manufacturing to the country of Totland. You'll see I put it in a different colour there, retaining one small factory in Lena to take advantage of the significantly lower production costs. So we've touched on this earlier on in the actual pre-seed materials. And this is where the next key actual aspect for you to get down is Exco Limited, or Exco, one of Totland's largest actual shoe manufacturers that produces shoes for Dearn in that country. Dearn's head office, the small factory and its warehouse are still in Leyen, so that is based in Luckland. It is one of the main employers in that particular area. So key aspects for you to get your head around and understanding the scenario there. Be sure to not mix up the names, locations, that's why I've colour coordinated it. And you'll see that we've got DT there as well, so shipping from Totland to Dearn's warehouse, so getting the products in from overseas from Totland to Dearn in Luckland is carried out by DT Global Transport on there. So they provide a very good service we'll come on to on page 8. Now most of Dearn's shoes are mass produced by Exco. The only so it's only formal shoes that are handcrafted in Luckland's factory. Its shoes are sold throughout Luckland directly to customers via its 75 branded retail outlets and its website. It does not export any of its production. So again, straight away there, you've got a SWOT analysis opportunity. You've already got a company in DT Global Transport who provide a good service who we could actually use. So that could be a recommendation for exports. Maybe we could bring those on board. And now we're getting into Well, we've got this Darren Shoes Limited. What is the actual ownership like? Well, the Dearn shares are actually split, as you can see below. So they have some founding family of 70%. So that relates to, as we saw above, for Dermot. So Dermot was part of the founding family. We're not told, however, how many of the people in the founding family own the shares. We're only told the percentage. The directors, as you can see on the right hand side, own 15% of the organisation, employment own 10%, and there are some other shareholders at 5%. Now, key aspects that link into areas like agency theory, as you can see from my notes, is that although the majority of the shares in Dearn are owned by the founder's family, none of the family are on the board or have any involvement in the management of the company on a day-to-day basis. So that board and organisational structure you can see on the right hand side, they are in charge in how Dearn operates. Nothing to do with the founding family. Dearn is not listed on the London Stock Exchange, but governance arrangements are consistent with good corporate governance. And if something about corporate governance was to come up, if you were to have a look on page 9, that is where the executive chair is accountable for that area. And the fact they even said it's not listed, that is where if they were to become listed, they would have to hit corporate governance standards in place because of the nature of the business with it now being listed. They talk about it again in the pre-seen materials. As a non-listed company, the directors have made the decision not to have an audit, nomination and remuneration committee. There is an internal audit team which reports to the Chief Financial Officer, the CFO. Now, what did I read between the lines on here? So the CFO roles are actually on page 9, so you can see the breakdowns on there. And Dearn actually has a revenue, we will find out later on page 12, of $352.5 million. So it actually potentially has the capacity to actually become a listed organisation. And therefore, if that was to happen, they would need an audit, they would need a nomination committee, and they would need a remuneration committee. And we'll see later on page 9, check it out now if you've already downloaded these notes. It sounds like the directors are pretty comfortable with the way that things are working out. They've been at the organisation for about 20 years, and they don't like change or to challenge what is actually going on. But when you read through the pre-seen materials, you kind of think, well, if Dearn doesn't actually change their strategy, is the organisation going to be sustainable in the long run? So plenty to discuss, especially from a SWOT, Pestle and Porter's analysis point of view. We now come up to some key stakeholders, and I've also put up there Mendelow's matrix model could be applied here as to you've got different levels of power and different levels of interest for the different stakeholder groups, and therefore we might need to allocate them either to being keeping them satisfied, are they key players, minimal effort, or keeping them informed. So some of the key stakeholders that are identified in the pre-seen materials, so both internal and external stakeholders that could be used in a form of analysis on the exam day, setting a requirement, are the actual shareholders. We've just touched on those in the previous page. The staff, head office, factory, warehouse staff, retail outlets, the customers, third-party manufacturer, so that's Exco, they're based in Totland. Distribution partner, that's DT Global Transport, DT. Suppliers, bank, the trade union, and the Luckland Shoe Association. So make sure you've got a note down of all of those. And maybe what to do before your exam is have some sort of pros and cons, or break them down into things that you would say about those different stakeholder groups if it was to be tested. There are high levels of loyalty, commitment and satisfaction among Dearn staff, and the staff turnover is low, which is very good. It means there isn't a lot of people leaving, and it is not uncommon for several generations of the same family to have worked in Dearn. So we have, if you go down to page 12, consistent staff satisfaction ratings, really, really good, but you could argue this is to their disadvantage about not be willing to pivot and to change strategy and to adopt to the changes in the marketplace, like the new fashion trends and things like ethical resourcing of the shoes and materials that we've already looked at. The relationship between Dearn and Exco was very positive. Now this is a really key point for you and key aspect you'll see in your notes to refer back to and get down in your notes. But over the last 2 years, there have been a growing number of issues with the quality of the output from its factories. Quality checks carried out in Luckland have highlighted poor production quality, and the number of returns from customers due to faulty shoes produced by Exco has been slowly rising. Delays in the dispatch of orders from Exco have also been increasing. Remember, customers will buy from Darren Shoes because, as we can see on the left-hand side, they've got that reputation as being reasonably priced, well-made shoes, and catering for all people on there. And one of the things that hasn't been going well is that quality. Shipping between Totland and Darren's warehouse in Lena is provided by DT Services. We've seen those in the key stakeholders, and they're the shipping carrier provider, and they have actually been excellent. So they could actually use DT for some export sales, and DT Travel Transport, it's worth stating if it comes up in a requirement, that they've been no problem. They're not part of the problem. They could be a potential solution on that. But this will all affect the brand reputation, and especially when the market growth is going to be slowing down, the quality has to still be there, or customers will go elsewhere to competitors. In terms of the board and organisational structure now, we're given on the right hand side the structure of Darren's board and their main responsibility areas as well. Now, in terms of this diagram you can see on the screen, key things to note down. In fact, there is quite a lot, but we'll get onto it first. There are no names provided for any of these positions at all, so we could get some on the day, or if you actually see in a requirement a particular area, you've got to know exactly what they do and where they are accountable. Now, in terms of the non-executive directors, we're not told anything about their experience, we're not told anything about their expertise, and we're not told anything about if there is a familiarity threat. Maybe they've been on the board for a significant number of years, especially when we're told information that lots of staff like to stay for a prolonged period of time. So all these sort of things link into it, with the final thing being, remember how we saw on page 7 that Dearn is not listed? Well, if it was to become listed, we need, for compliance with corporate governance standards, is that at least half of the board have to be non-executive directors of listed organisations. And as you can see at the moment, we don't currently have on there 50-50 split. So again, it is completely a who knows if it could be tested, but a point worth noting anyway in your notes. With the final part on here being some other models and frameworks, so you can see the Johnson, Scholes and Whittington model at the bottom. I've got down that it could be applied or tested because it links into strategic management and evaluating strategic options. So that key criteria areas of, is it suitable, is it feasible, and is it acceptable? And even I'm guessing as I say this, you're probably there going, I think that could be applied. That's got a lot to say. And the ACCA SBL team do particularly like the 6 capitals of integrated reporting, those being financial, manufactured, intellectual, human, social and relationship, and natural capital. So this is all on the basis that these capitals are the basis of an organisation's value creation and discuss the usefulness of this information to stakeholders. Again, plenty of legs on there to be tested come the exam day, so make sure you've got those models noted down. So now let's have a look at some of the officers and especially the executive chair. Now, first thing to note on the left hand side is the roles that you can see for each of the areas and the people involved. We're not given any names, but the key thing here is nobody on the board is accountable for sustainability or the environment. Now, the other thing relating to these roles is that on the exam day, if I was in your shoes, if you got a question on the factory and warehouse in Luckland, you would definitely have to refer to the Chief Operations Officer. And basically what I'm getting at is when you read through those requirements on the exam day, think which officer and which member of the board it relates to. There are also actually no KPIs provided in the pre-C notes for the directors to actually have some targets to aim to. So again, I'm thinking there, hey, it could come up on the exam day or be a very good point you could refer back to in terms of the pre-C materials. So I'll leave you to go through all the different roles and responsibilities, as you can see, bit by bit. And then in terms of those directors, this is the even more interesting part. that most of the directors have worked for Dearn for over 20 years, and relationships between them are positive. They take a risk-averse approach to decision making, so they sound pretty comfortable to me, but we might get information on the exam day that some of these actual officers are pretty new. But again, that is a bit subjective. We don't know until we get that unseen information, but it's just to be aware of. We also are told that Dearn has a functional top-down hierarchical structure with clear chains of command and formal lines of communication, responsibility and authority. Processes are well defined, and the focus within the company is ensuring the day-to-day operations run effectively and efficiently. You'll see on my notes on there, I put down straight away, doesn't sound very strategic to me, and a sort of top-down functional structure on there is where the leaders make the decisions and the people below actually just do as they're told. So it kind of comes across that the board of directors have got really comfortable, they do what they want to do, they make sure it ticks along on a day-to-day, week-by-week basis, but are not really concerned about the long-term strategy of the business, which leads me to think there are plenty of the models and the theories we've gone through so far in the pre-scene notes that could be applied. The organisation is divided into departments such as finance, purchasing, business development, human resources, IT, research development and customer service are in Dearn's head office. Thought it was a bit weird they didn't have a sort of sales department, so again, maybe if you want to put that one down. But the warehouse, factory and retail outlets form 3 further departments. The managers of each department comprise of the senior management team and report to members of the board. So in essence, the board is in control and they make all the decisions. Now, getting on to the actual products now, there is a small typo on here. So again, hopefully no one from ACCA is watching this, but who knows? But it should say Dearn sells 4 types of shoes: formal, semi-formal and children's shoes. Remember, the formal type of shoes are the handcrafted ones, semi-formal and children's shoes are all mass-produced, and the chief product officer is accountable for introducing the sales of casual shoes you can see on there. So for many years, and the casual shoes have been manufactured just 10 years ago. All are made in Topland by Exco, with the exception of formal shoes which are produced in Dearn's own factory in Luckland. Details are in table 3 below, which we'll come on to in a moment. But that is a key point there in terms of the location of the manufacturing, not to make mistakes on. And Dearn is struggling to engage with the casual shoes market, so there's plenty to discuss, and again, could relate into a management style question. We're going to come on to table 3 now on the right hand side, but there was a little bit more about that Dearn produces 20 different styles of each type of shoe. These styles are reviewed on an annual basis and updated for any changes in fashion, such as colour or height or of heel. Those which are performing poorly are no longer manufactured. When a style is removed, a new style is replaced. But if you look back at page 5, it seems way too long to be reviewing styles that are changing and doing this on an annual basis. It needs to be a heck of a lot quicker. And 20 different styles, another weakness I would say from a SWOT analysis perspective. We have the Chief Product Officer accountable for these areas, and we have a keyword of unusual to refer to on the exam day. So if we read it through, Dearn is unusual in the industry. Do you really want to be known as unusual with a 9.4% shareholding in the industry, as it uses both handcrafting and mass production and offers all 4 types of shoes. So not really specializing, and we're not really told about what different products and margins and profitability they all have, but you can kind of get a gist that the sort of formal handcrafted types of shoes have the higher margins, and especially with the economic climate, the margins for the semi-formal, casual and children's mass-produced products are getting squeezed even further because people have less disposable income and the costs are going up. So we have here that Dearn markets these shoes on there. So these are the formal handcrafted shoes which have the mill mark. That is the Made in Luckland accredited manufacturing mark on page 6, and very good to have. As they have handcrafted shoes, a skilled labour replaces some of the processes which are carried out by machines in a mass production environment. They are made of leather and are the most expensive shoes sold by Dearn on there. So for customers with more disposable income, that is where we have the target market of 30 to 50 year olds. Parrish is the market leader on here for this shoe type, and it charges actually a higher price than Dearn. So you've got to say to yourself, do they have a better brand image? Why is this the case? Higher profit margins potentially, but another opportunity out there. For the semi-formal mass-produced shoes, these shoes are cheaper than Dearn's formal shoes, as you would imagine. They're not handcrafted, and the soles are made from rubber rather than leather. The target market is for over 55s. Dearn is the market leader for this type of shoes, that's a good positive, and has a market share just slightly above that of Betterby, so they're the main competitor on there, and the other leading manufacturer of semi-formal shoes. When it comes to casual, other mass-produced shoes, the soles of these shoes are made from rubber, and the uppers are man-made materials, and so they are cheaper than Dearn's semi-formal shoes. The target market is 18 to 30-year-olds, a demographic Dearn is struggling to engage with, whereas Rego is the market leader for this type of shoe and commands a strong brand loyalty among its target demographic. So if you have a look on page 9, they've only been selling the casual shoes for 10 years. Someone at the director level has clearly had the idea of why don't we target this area, but it's not been successful, and therefore another weakness in the SWOT analysis. Lastly, we have children's mass-produced shoes. These are mass-produced leather shoes for children. Dearn is the market leader for this age group and has excellent reputation in its retail outlets for correctly measuring and fitting children's shoes. Dearn's closest competition is a smaller manufacturer called Tutor. So another key point to note down that they are another actual market leader here, but not necessarily for the quality and the type of shoe, but more the service they provide. So another opportunity that they could look at for the other areas to increase market share. And that company there for Tiptoe, that is the only place it's mentioned in the pre-seen notes. So definitely get that down, as it could come up on the exam day, or another company to refer to. We then come on to the manufacturing and sales processes. So 15 years ago, Dearn closed all its manufacturing facilities in Luckland, except for that one factory in Lena. We've also heard about this on page 7 in the company background. It continues to manufacture its formal shoes, those are the handcrafted ones in this factory, and carries out its research and development in Luckland too. So linking to expenditure there. Most of Dearn's output is sold through its 75 retail outlets. Remember that key number of 75 to apply in your answers, which are in towns and cities throughout Luckland. Dearn has an excellent reputation for high levels of customer service within these retail outlets, and this is one main reason for the organisation's success. The company has no retail outlets outside of Luckland and does not export. Again, two areas from a SWOT analysis that could be down as an opportunity. But in terms of customer service on here, which we'll come on to in page 12 in a moment, the actual service has been dropping year on year, and the quality of the goods is dropping year on year. So it's not looking good for Dearn in the short term, and the actual sustainability of the business in the long run. All of Dearn's products are also available via its online offering, which is available to customers in Luckland only. So again, not looking overseas, another opportunity there that the Chief Commercial Officer is accountable for. Customers must collect any products purchased online from their local Dearn retail outlet, as Dearn does not offer a home delivery service, which is unusual for Luckland. So why don't they deliver? Why are they not doing what the competitors do? And this could relate into that this has restricted online sales volumes, and they currently only have 12% of Dearn's total sales are all made online. So if you look back up to, I think it's page 6 on there, for the actual total market for Luckland, it's about 25% of the market make their sales online, whereas Dearn only has 12. So another opportunity from a SWOT analysis question if it was to be tested. We then come on to the stages which Dearn shows to go through from design to being sold in retail outlets, and they're illustrated in the diagram below. But before we get on to that, there are two other models to get down. That Boston Consulting matrix on there could possibly be tested, as it analyses product portfolios on there and the matrix, so definitely worth getting down. And Pop-It model on there is a framework that helps businesses to analyse and improve their processes and structures, so the people, the organisation, the processes, information and technology. Again, another model that could be applied based on the pre-seen materials. plenty of models that have a lot of legs that could be tested or applied. On the left hand side we have Dearn's manufacturing and sales process. Again, you just be careful on the colouring here, hence why I've referenced it A, B and C. But you've got all shoe types, formal shoe types, and then the Exco's factory in Totland. The bit you want to get down from here is who is accountable. So the Chief Product Officer. Nobody's accountable for sustainability or the environment, so linking that into the manufacturing process here. And the Chief Operations Operator is accountable for that manufacturing process in the second stage, where it's in the sort of more greyish colour on there. We can come down to a few more notes. Again, that Chief Commercial Officer is accountable for the retail outlets. We've got DT involved there, how it is being shipped. But the key bit at the bottom, as you can see, is the stages of the manufacturing process, all set out in section 2 on this document. And that was all about the shoe manufacturing and retailing industry, which you can find later back in your notes. In terms of the information systems now and use of technology, as you would imagine from a pestle point of view, plenty of technology aspects for you to include. So head office, it has an off-the-shelf finance and human resource system, which has been in place for a number of years. Human resource systems is fit for purpose, so pretty good there, based on the current operations, but the board is aware an investment, so capital expenditure, will be needed soon in a new finance system. So that is where the alarm bells start ringing when you sort of read this. A real risk area. A new inventory system has been recently introduced, but it does not provide the transparency that Dearn needs over its supply chain. So it shows visibility of inventory and retail outlets updated daily, but it only updates on a weekly basis for the rest of the supply chain. So if you're thinking some of it's going on a daily basis, some of it's going on a weekly basis, if anything goes wrong with these systems, or you want to refer back to it as a point on the exam day, if it links into a sort of technology or sort of information style question, page 9, the Chief Information Officer is accountable for this area. And the last page, for number 12, we have that Dearn has made significant investments in advanced manufacturing technology, so more capital expenditure there and technology aspects in terms of pestle in its Luckland factory. Remember, that is just for the actual handcrafted shoes. For those parts of the production process not carried out by skilled labour, so they've invested in some form of machinery. It has also invested in an automated picking process in its warehouse, which selects inventory for its retail outlets, and manual picking process is used for online orders. So again, more risks there that the Chief Product Officer is accountable for. There is an e-commerce platform which has relatively limited functionality. This has impacted on Dearn's ability to engage effectively with digital marketing. Depends how you look at it. It could be a SWOT analysis opportunity, but currently as it stands, a weakness. There is also an intranet on there, which includes information and resources for staff and areas of staff comments. So an intranet, as you saw me there, that's a local communications network. So maybe the sort of social aspect from a pestle analysis point of view, but because it's a sort of local community that has resources for staff and information on there and allows areas for staff to comment, could lead to issues that I would definitely make sure you get down from a people perspective. When we look at the risks, a TARA model again is a possibility here. So a structured approach to managing risks by classifying them into different areas. Should we transfer the risks, avoid the risks, reduce the risks, or actually just simply accept the risks? So when you're looking through these risks in the risk register, we've got the following risks are currently on Dearn's risk register: supply chain disruption, a potential economic downturn, which looks likely from what we've seen in the pre-seen materials. Dearn's limited online offering, again, they only get 12% of their sales compared to 25% in the other market competitors. Product recalls, product quality involving Exco Limited, that sort of party which they use in Totland. The environmental impact of the shoe industry and customers' reaction to it. Remember on page 9 that Dearn's board are actually very risk adverse to decision making, and quite a few of those points actually link to sorting out the quality of the products and how they are made. So refer to a SWOT, pestle, Porter's analysis question for each of those risk areas. And we come on to the extracts from the website now, the mission, the vision and the values. all areas they love to include in an SBL exam from a non-financial point of view, and just looking through them one by one. So quote these directly in your exam. That is absolutely paramount for you to do. And what you need to consider there is that we've been told in the mission that they are well made, reasonably priced, and an enjoyable customer experience. Well, if you have a look down at the bottom, the customer satisfaction has been declining year on year. Well made, the quality has been dropping, especially from the outsourced mass-produced products. And in terms of reasonably priced, we're not given too much in terms of pricing, so it could be an area on the exam day you're given on the unseen information. We're also given the vision to become the first choice for shoes of the whole family. Well, when you see the market share below going down from 10.1, 10.2 to 9.9 to 9.4, does that really tell you that they are first choice on there in terms of that vision being actually put into practice by the board of directors? Remember, the family, leave it to the board of directors to actually put that vision into practice, and it isn't being implemented with the market share going down. Lastly, we have the values of Dearn. So they're guided by their respect for their history, which they've been around for over 100 years, so that's a big tick. A focus on quality of the products or service. The quality, unfortunately, has been falling, especially since they made that decision to outsource their mass production. And lastly, long-term commitment to our staff. So looking at the bottom there, the staff satisfaction rating out of 10, it's been pretty consistent around the 8 mark, whereas the industry average is 7.2. So really good for staff. And we've seen in the pre-seen notes about the staff turnover rate being really low, so they like to work there, and generations tend to stay there for long times. You'll see in my notes as well, be super careful here. I've color coordinated it in purple, where we've got the industry average in 2004 compared to Dearn's figures for 2004. As you can see here, market share is in a worse position, revenue's been pretty flat, gross profit margin is still pretty healthy, which is good. Customer satisfaction is worse because it's gone down to 7 from 8.4 or 8.7 in 2000. Refer to those figures specifically if you do and it comes up in the exam for a requirement. And lastly, good point there for staff satisfaction, always above the line of 8. Whilst I was doing these notes, and last but by no means least, some possible scenarios to be given on the exam day. I don't have a crystal ball, but these were just things that came to mind about a sort of strategic meeting to discuss the new market opportunities, maybe some expansion, product innovation and changes. We have a board paper on governance reform, maybe some performance improvement as well, especially looking at the market share going down and the revenue being flatlined. There could be a crisis involving a recall potentially linking to those poor quality shoes, maybe a lawsuit or a customer's been injured. In terms of a relaunch online, so linking to that digital marketing point we saw before. And lastly, an internal audit report highlighting the risk management areas and weaknesses. A variety of things could come up on that, especially if they become listed. And that brings us, sadly, to the end of my pre-seen analysis notes. So you can see my last bit at the bottom is a massive best of luck for your up-and-coming examination. These notes took a heck of a lot of time, so if you've downloaded a copy, a massive thank you for all of your support in getting yourself a copy on there. Be sure to subscribe so that you get access to all the videos, and click the links down below to get yourself an Astranti mock paper and their pre-seen analysis pack. So I will see you on the other side now for another SBL video, and best of luck with your exam.